small town.
Yeah.
Let me call this meeting to order, please. Welcome, everyone, to the Easthampton Development Industrial Commission's October 15th meeting. For fun, we're going to read the mission, which is to support and enhance the economic environment for current and future businesses, residents, and the community at large. That is our goal. That's why we're here for 60 solid minutes. Did everyone have a chance to read through the September 17th, 2019 meeting minutes?
The tone, yes.
It was very beautiful in its detail.
Great job.
Thank
Actually,
you,
yeah, I
John.
missed the meeting and I feel informed.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so shall we, let's work on, do I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes from September? Oh, boy. Cassie, would you like to second?
I will second.
Magnificent. All right, all in favor of approving the September 17th meeting minutes? All right.
No.
Any abstentions? Any nays? Great. We've approved.
You again.
Oh, yeah. Welcome, Mayor. Okay, so now, Chris, is our formal public speak time. I would like to invite you to introduce who you are and why you are interested in being here today to the group.
Sure. So my name is Chris Lee. I moved to town about 2 years ago with my wife. I have a little bit of a background in multifamily renovation and development and own a handful of apartments back in Maine. Since coming here, I haven't done anything in real estate except for buy the house we own on Spring Street and work on that. And about 2.5 months ago, I had this idea to help homeowners put what are essentially tiny homes in their backyard to help tackle the housing crisis, knowing that these could ultimately be more affordable than renovating anything, cheaper than stick building, easier for the homeowner because they get brought in 95% done. And the only hurdle might be zoning rules in some towns, but luckily in Easthampton, they're not a huge hurdle. And as I started doing this, realized it may be even less of a hurdle as we move forward. So I've been working on that full time for about 2.5 months. And I met Sarah Hunter and Chandra Linnell, who are my first project on Mare Street. And I'll be looking for approval for that next week at the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Would you like to interrogate the witness?
I would love to.
Please.
So, Chris, when I first heard about these and inquired around town for different folks, I thought the zoning was going to be a hurdle for you. So what will it be? Just a special permit each time you do it, or special dispensation from the zoning board, or whatever?
Yes, so it's a process of going through and getting the special permit, which from my understanding, I mean, there are rules that are quasi in favor of these. There's a lot of ambiguous language in them, which can be positive or negative depending on where the board stands on introducing these things. And working with Jeff and Jamie and hearing from the town, it seems like as long as what's being proposed is not absurd, they would be on board. I have learned just in the past week that there is going to be pushback from neighbors, and that is going to present a hurdle as long as the special permit is something that I need, because they could overturn it. A minority can easily offset a zoning board. And from my standpoint, because I'm willing to put in the extra time to do the first few of these, it's not terrible, but it does pose a risk to the homeowner, just losing the initial fees of getting the planning board. It's not a lot of money, but something they have to think about.
If it's denied, you do.
Yeah.
So, go ahead, Josh.
I have a couple questions. Last name Lee, L-E-E?
Yes.
Okay, and what's the name of your business?
Backyard ADUs.
Backyard ADU, okay. And I have a quick comment. I'm all for it. There was a big series of articles about 4 years ago in the paper of a woman who built a tiny house, and a lot of neighbors objected to it. And the thing that just riles me is all the people who don't object to people having campers, the neighbors having campers in their yard that are clearly occupied with people living there. So.
Just as a bit of background too, Chris, I mean, if you were to go down Maple Street in Easthampton, the intersection of Maple and Franklin, based on some zoning that was changed for a short period of time, someone was able to buy a home, take it down, and build 3 homes right there. And there was a huge uproar. uproar to the point that the city put the zoning back to the way it was. If you go down there today, which is maybe, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, the houses look like they've always been there.
You wouldn't know which.
You wouldn't know which ones they were. Now, they do all look alike. They were
Yeah.
like cookie cutter. You might pick them out, but based on landscaping differences and, aesthetics and
blended
things,
right in.
you wouldn't know that those 3 houses weren't there for 100 years.
Right.
So I think to Josh's point, there may be some pushback in the beginning, but when people realize that if this goes in someone's backyard next to them, the world's not going to come to an end. I don't know what the objections might be, other than I don't want it in my backyard, my neighbor's backyard, which is that NIMBYism happens all the time, unfortunately. But to me, I mean, we've used the phrase housing crisis, and we've talked about it for years now here, and there is a housing crisis. And if you want to see prices continue to go up and taxes continue to go up, stop building houses, and that'll happen. And we're living it today. So,
Cassie?
Yeah, I just don't understand. I would put this little, why would I put a little house in my backyard? Do I sell it to somebody for $12 or?
I'll give you
I'm
an
just
example.
making up
Give you
the
an
money,
example.
I'm making up the dollars, but
Since a family lives in a house, 3 kids, something like that. Kids grow up, move out. Parents still live there. Big house, too much to heat, too much to take care of. They move into the small house. Kids take over the big house, maintain the big house. They're able to stay in the neighborhood that they have been
That's
forever.
very
So that
cool.
it's that kind of thing. I've got a deaf brother who still is in an apartment, but the day will come when he will no longer be in that apartment. And I have to find him another place to live. So I actually have a place that would be eligible for that based on its size. I think it's kind of a case-by-case basis, the way I'd like to look at it.
Yeah.
Generally for it. And the other part I'd like to point out too is that the housing crisis is something we feel we're getting a housing study that'll be able to answer a little bit more about what our situation
And that
is.
was very well. When I first met Jeff, he told me that he submitted the grant, and he was quietly asking me not to go too fast until the grant came back.
That's right.
and it has actually, right, Mayor? That grant did come back positive, I thought.
The downtown strategic plan is giving us an outline of housing need and a little bit of production. We're about to get back the RFP on the housing production and need study,
Okay.
which is very focused
Right.
on now and going forward. And I think that there'll be some surprises, not even need, but preference, like where people want to live. So,
Where the bottlenecks are.
There are also a number of people who just
Yeah.
want to reduce their carbon footprint.
Yep.
And so they will pay to build their own house.
Yeah.
And they'll ask someone else who has a large piece of property, can I just house this in the back of your property?
So I guess that's the question. Are you looking to build tiny homes or accessory dwellings like 1,000 square foot?
So accessory dwellings.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
These
Okay.
are, I'm using the word tiny home because it gets people excited.
Yeah.
And they are immediately connected to a detached thing that's smaller than a house.
Right.
But at the end of the day, what I want to do is something that's more livable for the average person. So the model that's going on Mayor Street is 525 square feet, 1 bedroom, so a standard 1-bedroom apartment. And then there's a second version of it that's a 2-bed, that's a 700 square foot 2-bedroom. And that actually goes into one thing about the zoning bylaw that will make it difficult, and it will actually be a negative on lower income households, is the square footage rules.
Yeah.
So if you have a smaller house, you may have less income, and you're not going to be able to put a bigger asset on the property. And a lot will not qualify for that 700 square foot 2-bedroom. Because of just the number of ranches that are in town.
And do the utilities tie into the home or
Yes.
tie directly into the street?
So they're probably mostly going to go into the home. I am talking to the Board of Public Works at the hearing tomorrow about, I just want to start a conversation about setting up a process for asking for an approval for a second connection on a 1-family property. The example on Merritt Street's a good one where it probably would have been better to do a new connection because it's dual frontage and there'll be a lot of cases like that. because the PDs are running, stay within the guidelines and connect to the existing house. But the other question that's similar to that is second driveways.
So back to Cassie's question for a moment. So I understand that the majority of these are going to be family generational type of arrangements. But what happens when it's not? The property's not being subdivided, so it's still one parcel. What happens when there's no more family down the food chain and somebody says, I want to sell these separately?
So it becomes,
That's not an option?
yeah, they couldn't sell them separately. Essentially, what
They could or couldn't use
they
it?
could not.
They could not.
What's essentially happening is there's the single family is getting turned into a two-family with a zoning, with a deed restriction that
Okay.
basically says this is a two-family as long as one of the units is owner occupied.
Yeah.
Right, and
So-
we're talking about the accessory dwellings being attached generally to the main house.
No.
Or are you talking?
These
the
are
full-
completely separate, and the reason I went down that path is, so I lived in a 2-unit, that was my first rental property, and there's a lot of negatives to sharing a wall. You're very, very close to your tenant.
Yeah.
Even if it's your parents, you may not want to be that close. And I've actually heard that many, many times at this point.
Okay, that's what I was asking with the
Yeah.
tiny home.
And it's actually easier and cheaper to separate it, because when you think about trying to snake utilities through an existing home, you're ripping stuff apart, you're creating a headache for the homeowner. And with building code, as soon as you touch something on the existing, you're releasing everything to bring up insulation and windows, and this we can just say, we're not touching the house, we're just going
So these would not
outside.
be, these would be permanent structures, not?
Yes, yeah, foundation, tied to the ground.
On a slab?
So it's what we're planning to do is a shallow stem wall.
Okay.
That's insulated concrete block, so we don't have to dig too deep.
Yeah.
It's we lift the frost line up essentially, so we don't have to go down even to 4 feet.
So I did share with Chris before the meeting that I took an opportunity to speak to a local realtor about, so what does that do to the value of my home if I have one of these in my backyard? Does it decrease it? Does it increase it? What does it do? After a lot of thought, he said, I think it's neutral. He equated it to an in-ground pool. So Nicole might look at a house with an in-ground pool and say, oh my God, I'm in love with this house. I'm gonna pay up. I'm gonna pay what they're asking. I mean, if it goes, I want this in-ground pool. I might go there and say, the last thing I want in my backyard is an in-ground pool. It's gonna be people, same thing with this, he felt. There's gonna be people that are gonna say, my God, this is exactly what I'm looking for. Other people are gonna say, why do I want a little house in my backyard? So he looked at it as being neutral to the value of your home when you go to sell it.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, you feel, we're having trouble keeping Easthampton affordable, and you think about those young families or, as single folks who not want to buy a home. Well, if you have some kind of income, say it's not a family thing, or, you're going to charge your mother exorbitant rent if she's going to live close to you. Not that I would do that. But, it helps, right? When you go for money, you can write a mortgage, you can show. Or maybe it's something where a family member is going to come and live. I mean,
Yeah, these are essentially, from what I understand, two-family homes only spread out on property.
Right.
Nobody can get two-family homes these days in Easthampton. They go way too quick.
And remind me again, they do not sell separately? If someone goes
No,
to
they
sell?
can't.
No,
Parcels stay
the
one.
lots are non-conforming usually.
Yeah, okay.
I was gonna ask a question based on what Nicole just said, and it passed me right by. Oh, when it comes to the property as a whole, yard sharing, so to speak, is that just an arrangement? So I decide that I'm gonna put one of these in my yard and I'm gonna let my best friend live there. Not a family member, whatever, my best friend's gonna live there. And he decides to have 25 of his buddies over for a drinking party in my backyard. That just becomes an arrangement between the two of you?
Yeah, Mr. Landlord, what's your policy?
So I could, is there actually like a rental agreement and I could evict that person?
Yeah, so you would lease this out as a separate unit.
Great. Love it.
Full lease and everything, and you could do that. A lot of towns are, and Amherst is one of them, don't allow short-term rentals, which I would support as well. I mean, if the point of these is to help the housing crisis, it's not to let people Airbnb them.
Right.
I was going to say that's an interesting question around Airbnb.
Yeah, in the Cape, they're doing a lot of Airbnb, but that really helps them with the affordability of those and taxes.
And from your experience, what is average monthly rental go for one of these?
That's a tough question. If the homeowner gets to set it, and as this is going to be a high premium rental product, I'm sure they could get 1,500,
Yeah.
17. They could get the top of the market. But what usually happens with a duplex is the homeowner is going to typically charge under market because they have to look the person in the eye and take the check. So, and they have data for this out on the West Coast in Oregon where there's a lot of this, is they're finding that even without rent restrictions that they're renting out or below market just because it's a friendly hand-to-hand transaction, and you're not getting like a separate landlord who's comfortable just charging through the roof. So it could potentially be a natural compression of rents.
Would you think that city would reappraise the property and increase the value if another outbuilding was put on those buildings?
I would certainly be in support of that, Casey.
Well, except, you remember what the realtor said, it's probably a neutral impact.
Yeah.
So the homeowner's gonna have to go and say, hey, wait a minute, here's the.
Well, I guess over time, you can look at comps and say, oh, look,
Exactly, over
with
time,
these
they
things they
increase.
do.
I mean, I think it's possible. I don't want to go on the, I'm not sure.
I just don't want people to freak out. It'd be sort of like you drop, like, I don't know what you're costing these things, $25,000, $30,000, and then the city come knocking and say, hey, listen.
I'm pricing them in, like when I talk to somebody who's going to think about this as a for-profit rental thing, and they ask the question, I'm pricing it as 75% of the install cost is what will be the new assessed value. So just add that on the top, and like for the average house in Easthampton ends up being $1,000. So if you are getting rental income, it really doesn't matter. And if your mom is moving in, you're still in a better situation than if they're renting something.
Right. And this is actually built, you said, this isn't Skip's Outdoor showing up and dropping something on a pad.
It is that.
It is that.
So we toured a ton of factories, and we have chosen one in the middle of Pennsylvania that has a super high level of quality. And what it allows us to do is basically create something that's sprayed with spray foam, bats behind it, high-end siding, upgraded Harvey windows, proper gabled roof, upgraded interior, everything's premium, and put it on a lot for $125 all in. And we can't touch that stick building. My business partner, who's the GC out of Whately, when he was there, he's just like, if this catches on, we're not going to be able to build houses.
How many
people
square foot for 125?
525. And really with that number, like if we went to 600, it doesn't make a huge difference. The bulk of the cost of the thing, the way it's set up, is basically how the factory's laid out. And you see a bunch just from the assumption that there's a bathroom, there's a kitchen, and a certain amount of flooring. Like adding 5 feet or adding another box is isn't a huge factor. The utilities are really, for the one bedroom, it's about 50-50 cost of the building delivered and cost of digging holes.
Well, from the one on Mayor Street, I will see it from my front yard, and Gwen will see it from her side yard. And I don't know, I can.
Wait, do you live on Grove Street too?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Why, who else is on Grove Street?
I met, Lori's probably gonna be leaving notes on your doors. I met Lori at 10 Grove Street yesterday.
Yeah. Does she have room?
For,
No, she's against it.
Oh,
She's against it.
we had a long conversation yesterday, and I
thought you
offered
mentioned
to do a
looking
neighborhood
through.
meeting to explain what's going into
Yeah.
before the hearing next week.
But personally, I'm again, if it's as nice as you just made it sound, I'm not going to be opposed to it.
Yeah, that's the
What's the
goal.
minimum amount of space that you need to do this?
Um,
I would think beyond the footprint of the house itself, what's the guideline as to how much space you can have?
to install it?
Yeah.
No,
So-
for when it's done, I guess you're thinking.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, for when it's done, you have the structure sitting here. If my yard's this big, and my house is this big, I don't want another house that doesn't leave any yard.
Is it just
What kind of
Gotcha.
watchword do you have?
So the one bedroom model that's going on Grove is 39 by 13 and a half feet.
It's going on Mayor, right?
Mayor, facing Grove.
Face Grove.
30
Because they have that giant
39
Those are
feet.
some weird lots.
13.
Yeah.
Very
I don't know who
strange.
owns what there.
Well, Jen,
But we can compress that too, depending on the yard size. Some of it with, not all yards could fit that. So one of the things that we'll be doing is, as we get additional opportunities, is designing one that would fit in a side yard. and have that be a little bit shorter, a little bit longer.
It's a case by case basis.
Exactly, and we'll have a bunch
there
to
is-
choose from.
So this will have a Grove Street address.
So I
Maybe
honestly
I'm
don't
opposed to that.
know how the addressing is going to work.
Yeah.
It's going to look like a ranch on Grove Street in that backyard
So
area.
my guess is it'll be a Grove, okay, now I'm opposed. I'm kidding.
But the only thing stopping you is setback rules from where you could put it.
So the setback rules are somewhat restrictive. Like if we're looking at Easthampton as a whole, they're restrictive. But I looked at a huge amount of properties in the R5, R10, and R15, and some R30. And I came up with 110 that I think I could put this in with the current rules. The primary problems with setbacks right now is the rear yard setback tends to be huge, and then a lot of times, and then the side yard setback based on the rules is actually a little bit ambiguous. It could be 6, it could be 15. It kind of depends on how it gets interpreted. But basically, what that does, it makes the unit go in an awkward spot for the homeowner. You could think ideally the homeowner is going to say, put this in the back corner by the fence under the tree, which would look good from the setting, but it wouldn't work from a setback. Where ideally the setback would be very small, and there'd be an additional rule that says if you put it within 10 feet, you're expected to plant arborvitaes or put a fence in.
But that's an example, the house on the corner of Holyoke and Mayor, the blue house. Previous owners of that, you see that giant lot they have there. Previous owners had tried to build another house there.
Yep.
And it's just like this much too small to be able to build
2 feet.
a house. 2 feet too small.
2
to be
feet
a
to
legal
put,
building lot.
well, that's actually not true, and that's one of the things I was talking to Lori about. I basically said, look, this is essentially 2 lots. We could split this, and this house as is could go in without the front porch. The front porch, it's like, right now it's spec'd out, there's gonna be 58 feet of trenching to put the utilities in, there has to be 30 per yard in the back. If I just make the thing a little bit skinnier, it will slide right in. But a regular house would be difficult. It'd be kind of a weird, long, skinny thing. It would look like a mobile
And I'm
home.
not interested in Lori's specific objections, but in general, what are the objections you're hearing? Just don't want to see it in front.
To be honest, the only one I spoke to is Lori, and it was more I'd prefer it to stay green grass,
Yeah.
which is fair enough. If I was looking at green grass, I'd prefer that too. But like what we're trying to do is make these things look good,
Right.
so
They're not
they're not eyesores. No, they definitely shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Did you already say if you do a separate driveway, and I missed that?
So I'm talking to the Board of Public Works tomorrow at the hearing, their regular monthly, and I'm asking about utilities in the driveway. I need specifically a driveway permit for this one. But in general, I'd like to figure out how I can ask them for permission without waiting for the monthly board meeting every time it's needed.
And have you done this anywhere else?
No, this is gonna be the first one. I've been thinking about this for a while. I put plans together back in Portland to try to do a whole community. But it was right at the end of when my wife was getting placed at Bay State. So we ended up moving.
Portland, Maine, or Oregon?
Portland, Maine.
Okay.
So Grove Street won't be an issue, but I'm curious what the DPW would say about streets where you have to make a curb cut that's not there today.
Yeah.
You know, Grove Street doesn't have any curbs, so it won't be an issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty simple to run a driveway to the street.
Yeah.
But if you were gonna do it on Holyoke Street or some other street that's got a legitimate curb
Right.
that you'd have to cut into, I'd be curious what DPW would think about
Yeah, I
it.
don't think there's none on. There isn't anything on Holyoke Street where I'd want to do it that way. And I think I've looked at the entire Holyoke Street. It's mostly side streets
Yeah.
that have double lots where it would make sense. Or there's a few on Holyoke Street where the double lot goes onto a side street. So you think that you got the Holyoke Street address and you take a right, and then there's a second lot behind the house that's unused, where that would be the use case for the second curb cut.
I mean, I would think in a place where there are already multifamily units, there'd be a lot less opposition. I mean, you happen to be taking the toughest one out of the gate because it's all single-family homes.
Right.
So you're putting in a sense, building a multifamily home in a single-family home neighborhood. So
Right.
there's bound to be some opposition. But if somebody had an extra lot in New City and you put it there, nobody's gonna blink probably.
Yeah, there's not a lot over there though. Unfortunately,
pretty
it's
dense.
too
Very dense.
dense already.
It's pretty dense.
And a lot of that stuff, when they changed it to, I don't remember what was said, it changed, the zoning changed, and now a huge number of those are unconforming.
Yeah.
And they can't be touched very easily. I think there was only 4 properties in that area. And I think of those 4, many were duplexes.
Yeah.
So you'd have to go through the motions of trying to get them converted to a 3-family, which, because it's already non-conforming on a duplex, it's probably a non-starter.
Interesting.
All right. This has been very interesting. I've learned a lot of questions that I never would have asked. This ties in very nicely to some things that Chris Korchek here would like to talk about with us and get rolling on thinking about as a committee so that we could make some recommendations to City Council. Would you like to go
Yeah,
from
sure.
there?
I had this cough, I'm sorry in advance, but
But
Tell me now after I've been sitting here for half an hour.
I saw him 3 times, and I was like, he looks so familiar.
Yeah.
Who is
Really?
he? Oh yeah, I walked by you
that
once.
Futures thing, I was like,
And then, like, I think I saw you with one of your
That's
kids
super
or Helen,
funny.
and I was like, oh my god. There you go.
So, what I wanted to talk about was accessory dwelling units, but I wasn't thinking about detached structures. What I had in mind was just building in-law apartments, or adding not 1,000, but adding 700 square feet. Generally, for people who can't afford to live there anymore, to get some income to help pay their rent, while at the same time creating housing for lower income people who want a 700 square foot apartment. And the way that I understand it works now, and I don't know this, I've been keeping notes for a few months on this, but I haven't done any deep dives. And it's interesting that Chris brought up Sarah, because Sarah's on my list. I spoke with her a while ago, and I've been waiting for the project to end so I can get a good scope of how it works now. And my understanding is that anyone could go and build an accessory dwelling now. And I think the only hoop is getting a special permit, and that's what you're discovering, right? Now, are you able to act as your clients' agents in getting that, or do they not have to show up?
They don't. I don't think they have to, but I'm asking them to. It would help. I'm assuming the zoning board see who this is for, why they want it.
Okay, so that's really the only impediment from someone saying, I want to build, I want to change this to a 2-family.
Well, the other thing Chris
Yeah.
had said was, what can happen though is if a group shows up in opposition, that can be
Sure.
the other negative that
Yeah.
shoots it down, because we've all seen how, and this is meant with no disrespect, but when a board in town has 10 people in front of them that are screaming no,
Yeah.
it's a big motivator.
It's the whole town, in your view.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
No, it's definitely not insignificant that your client has to show up, because after a few go up, people are going to start worrying about infill. So I guess the thing that I wanted to do was try to get us on on the same page about whether or not we should be able to just build one without a special permit. I think that we should. I think that anyone should be able to do whatever they want to their property, basically, within, zoning rules.
Yeah, I'll give you a little example. I've had to come to this room several times to get a special permit to get my house built.
Right.
I have an acre of land with a 4-family on it, and we put a single family there, but a bunch of resistance because I didn't have enough frontage. Even though the subdivided lot is bigger than the majority of the lots in the neighborhood.
You took out a 4-family?
No, we still have it.
Oh,
Next
you
door.
added
It's
one.
we added one because that's such a big lot.
Okay.
But it was really it was a lot of hurdles for like a no-brainer.
Right.
As far as it was basically another lot, except for the frontage wasn't big enough.
So it's the hurdles that concern me, because we have this shortage, particularly amongst cheap housing. And,
But we also don't want to just open the door.
well, that's the question,
Well,
right?
except there are things in town in certain zones, and Mayor jump in anytime, that you can do things by right.
Right.
Today. So in a neighborhood business district, you can put in a certain thing by right.
Yep.
You don't need a special permit, you can do it by right.
Yep.
Could we create the zoning that allowed, with the necessary, guardrails on it, that said, if you meet this criteria, you can do this accessory dwelling by right.
Right,
It's
that's,
like you're inside his brain.
that's exactly where I'm trying to go. I'm trying to figure out what criteria we could find to let
And then
people
anything
do this,
beyond
but
that is a
not
special permit.
Anything beyond that.
anything beyond that, sure.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we can give some leeway to people that just want to throw up even 500 square feet, you know, a sidecar to their house so they can get an extra $700-800 a month, you know?
No, exactly, and I think it's percentage of lot size, percentage of frontage, percentage of, and we could come up with sort of
Yeah,
one that would, like, if he, you know, said that he found 110, that we could simply say, all right, well, look, 75 fit the criteria of what we think is a no-brainer, and these other 35 are sort of, you know, frontage, these kind of things,
Right.
and we say, well, maybe those fall into the special permit area, but if we sort of come up with a general number of saying, okay, it's only 20% of the lot, if it's rest of the neighborhood is certain density issues,
yeah.
you know, just, I mean, I went to Northampton by Webb's, and a neighbor pointed out that there's, somebody tore down the corner lot, put in 3 nice condos, and it's a little fishy from the neighbor's side, but they look great. You know, nice modern design, they each have a driveway, and it's sort of like good designs is a solution to sort of stuff, and,
Yeah.
and one of the things that's nice is to do infill, right? We already have the sewer system, we already have these things in place, walking to downtown, all these different things that are a positive, so it's, yeah, I want to make it easy, but I don't want to say open the doors.
Yeah, exactly. We have to figure out a way, and I don't exactly know how to do this, but we have to figure out a way to open it up, at least
In other
on
cities, right? Have other cities gone through examples of doing the work?
Yeah, I think Amherst has done quite a bit of work on this. They have a very extensive zoning bylaw that covers a lot of concerns that were obviously brought up in meetings by the town. Like, they go as deep as saying trash barrels have to be under a roof, kind of thing. It's that specific. There is also a model bylaw that people in Portland, Oregon put together that can be used. It's on accessorydwellingunits.org. And those people out there are very happy to talk as well and kind of consult on it. I've been in touch with them, they're kind of pointing me in the right direction.
So is Amherst at a point where they can be done by right, or is it still a special permit
So it's
process?
by right in some districts. So they isolated ones where they're, and I haven't looked too deeply into that yet to know why they would have chosen certain districts. I know there's a lot of concern with students and piling too many bodies into units, and then what was a nice quiet street becoming a party street, which I don't think we worry about here.
Yeah, that's exactly that's definitely one of the line items, is to cannibalize other cities' land use.
I would mention too that the housing choice bill that the governor was not able to pass last session and is trying again specifically addresses ADUs and zoning, and it's supported by the realtors on the national and state level, as well as the Mass Municipal Association, and like Very and CHAPA, a whole bunch of housing related organizations that usually do not support the same things. And there is guidance in what they have proposed, but also the realtors in particular and MMA have summarized the pros and the cons and the whys really nicely. So I mean that's pretty easy to get off of both websites. I signed on to Housing Choice in the initial adoption by mayors because it makes a lot of sense. And what I like about the Housing Choice is that it takes really nice housing tools from a 2/3 majority to just a simple majority, and it's option in, and it's not just one thing. It's not just ADUs. It's not just infills or adding upward. It goes across, so municipalities can pick and choose what's right, and a percent of different options or criteria very nicely. So I don't think it'll pass this time, but I think there's good backup for what we're talking here. And I think with a reasonable presentation in ordinance language, we could even get a 2/3 majority, from City Council with a lot of support from different groups.
Welcome.
Excuse my tardiness.
You're technically here.
I was just gonna say.
I think in terms of the zoning ordinance, I think one of the tricky things from what I've seen in looking at properties around town is very specific setback requirements or lot size requirements. There's a lot of cases where there's a spot that would be perfect from a onlooker's standpoint. Like you could insert one of these in that fits with the character of the neighborhood, but would not fit a standard setback requirement. So it kind of goes into this area of, well, if there's some ability to always request a review, regardless of what the rules are, it would open the door to allowing creativity into the design process and placement of these. That way it's not being, like a good example is with the rules right now, I could design these things and they'd look a lot like mobile homes, very shallow roof pitches, and I could stick them really close to the side lot lines as accessory structures. But it wouldn't look good. It wouldn't be in the character of the house or anything like that. But if there was flexibility to get a design review, I think that would be helpful.
I would hope that we wouldn't be so stringent, and I'm not trying to put Jeff in a hot spot, but he showed up late, so we deserve. I'm just kidding, Jeff. I'm just kidding.
I'm ready.
No. I would hope that we wouldn't be so black and white that if, for example, a rear setback was 10 feet, and this beautiful accessory dwelling you were going to put there was going to make it, 8 feet, that somebody wouldn't just say, nope, sorry, you're 2 feet short, bye. That there'd be some discussion and some potential for latitude that says, okay, apply, tell us why it should go there, show us pictures, what it's gonna look like, aesthetically, all of that. Yeah, makes sense. What's wrong with 2 feet short? And I don't know if there's that kind of latitude or it is black and white.
Right now, the way the zoning is set up, I think the better example is, so if you get into like I guess at R40, which is all the plains area, or R35, which is a lot of the other areas, yeah. Those setbacks are like 30 feet. So you're talking like side yard setbacks 30 feet, rear yard setbacks 30 feet. So the way the zoning works right now is that for a dwelling unit, you cannot go closer than 30 feet. It's the end of the story.
Black and white.
Right.
But we should keep in mind that these setbacks are they only affect freestanding structures, generally speaking. I mean, if you're talking about adding on to an existing building, probably are not going to hit the setback. You might.
Yeah. They apply to like a principal use.
Well, that's what I originally envisioned. I'm not opposed to freestanding accessory dwellings.
With
but
additions like that,
addition is to.
I don't, unless it's going above a garage, I don't think there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be able to do it affordably. Because as soon as you start, like I was saying, you touch that house, you're going to trigger other upgrades. And trying to get the architecture right to make it fit, like usually walls have windows, for example.
Yeah.
Just something like that. It's not easy to do.
Yeah.
So it could go through the motion to try to figure it out, but I would be surprised if there's a lot of people who would be able to do it.
That's fair, but not none.
None.
Right.
What they do with what has been done when there is an attached requirement is breezeways get built to make it quasi-attached.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily what is wanted either, because now you're just creating this random long hallway that should have been landscaping and open space.
I mean, I think jumping in late, I have had one discussion with Chris. So I think if you think about it in increments, so we're looking for incremental changes. So the study, the housing needs assessment that we're going to do is intended to look at zoning that may be preventing new housing development. And I think that this will clearly get identified as one of our problems to solve. The first order of business in theory is to allow a detached second unit to be constructed with a building permit if it meets the setback requirements, right? So that's our first level of priority, is to try to allow it with a building permit if it meets the setbacks.
With no special permit.
Correct.
Right.
So you take out the special permitting if it conforms to whatever the setbacks are for the district. And I think where Chris is looking ahead is there are smaller lots or funky configurations where you would want to go a little bit closer. And so the second increment in would be a special permit that would allow a side yard setback to be reduced.
So-
And that's pretty common, actually, that to put it under a special permit so that you get a zoning board of appeals who would look at the surroundings and make sure that it's not gonna be 0 when there's a house at 0 on the other side. So it's 2 increments. One is if it meets the setbacks, we wanna try to encourage that by allowing it with a building permit. And then there would be that second layer in where and it's really simple in terms of amending the zoning, is usually just side yard setback 35 feet with an asterisk. Special permit could allow for deviation from that requirement and make it a case by case.
So what Chris is doing, looking to do on Mayor Street
Yep.
is not permittable today, it needs a special permit?
Yeah, it's permittable with a special permit, so that's good.
Even if it meets the setbacks?
Correct.
Okay.
I mean, that's good, but I think if you look back from a homeowner's perspective, that's, 3 months
That's the step I'm trying to.
Right, so 3 months of the only thing the homeowner is doing is waiting in line to get before the ZBA to know whether they can do it or not. It's probably gonna be about, we should clarify this, but it's probably about $350 of their money that, should the ZBA
It's
say
at
no,
risk.
it's not refundable. And then there's a lot of uncertainties at that point where you have the ZBA decision, and then they're applying for building permits, waiting for that to get processed. So there's a potentially unnecessary step.
Well, we used to
Great.
say that the pioneers took all the arrows, so, for the settlers to come behind them. So, if a few homeowners have to take the arrows, the other settlers coming behind them, right?
Oh,
It took me a
let's-
while to get that. I thought they literally were taking the arrows.
No, no.
Right.
What is that?
Backside.
Yeah,
Backside.
yeah, I got it.
Chris.
Yeah.
Having heard all of this,
Yeah.
because I want to talk about other things, what would you like to achieve today before we leave the room?
I think that we need to, there's a couple of things. You know Janet Petrol,
I
right?
sure do.
Can you, or I can invite her to next meeting?
I can.
Okay. Is anyone willing to scour other cities' laws on by right dwellings?
Talking about
would-
action steps,
Yeah,
right?
I
And you
would-
gave some good leads there.
Yeah, I would start there with
Yeah.
the leads because they'll do the research for you.
Okay.
So like Peter Davies, who's on our Board of Assessors, kind of knows about that going into East Hampton, but also can hit the Realtors database and give us a sketch of ordinance. I would at least have a conversation, and he might also give you solid ideas of, Amherst ordinance is tough to compare to East Hampton because we don't have UMass Amherst.
Right.
Or, what is a more comparable town?
So who
of
wants to
that?
have lunch with Peter Davies? Anybody nodded on you, Jenna?
Well, some of this data exists, so it's not, so Pioneer Valley Planning Commission has some of the data
Oh, yeah.
on
PVPC.
the comparison of how towns are dealing with the second dwelling unit. So it's not, I don't think there's a need to start from scratch, which I think is gonna be very beneficial, that's a good thing. I will just throw out anecdotally that I think Northampton is the only town in the vicinity that has done second units by right. So they're leaders in that respect. The other towns have kind of been satisfied with the special permit provisions, which we fall in that category.
Is Wayne still there?
Wayne is in Northampton, yeah.
Is that the person Chris would contact if he was looking for a copy?
Carolyn Mish is the other planner in the office, and she's the one, I attended a presentation where she was talking about their program on this, so.
I just want to inject one thing and then I gotta go.
Okay.
So when we're talking about this in its very early stages, the one pitch I would make around Airbnb and HomeAway is East Hampton, the chance of East Hampton supporting in the near to intermediate future a hotel is probably not going to happen, and people have been looking at that forever.
Agreed.
And Airbnb with good regulations and a tax it's something we really should consider and not just say, and it is happening a lot here, and with little impact. I mean, I would just, and it's happening in some accessory dwelling units that started off as an in-law apartment or a garage that accidentally grew to having a bathroom and a kitchen.
And is that by permit, or is that just because they're asked for?
In-laws were definitely by permit. because
The
when I was on-
Airbnb part, you said it's happening.
No,
No,
it's just
it-
involved and that's what people do.
yeah,
They can just do it. No permits required, no nothing. They can just do it.
yeah, they can, and the
You
liability
mean
is
Airbnb?
everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, an extra bedroom, but I would just, when we're talking about this, I think that to say we don't want it to be an Airbnb or yes, like preemptive, like we should really think about that and Jeff's study is gonna address that.
I agree with you about the hotel, Nicole. Most studies have shown that you might fill it 30 days out of the year, and the other
Right.
11 months you're gonna go broke.
Right. And we're not, so I would just put that out there, and I think Airbnb and that kind of economy, especially with the app taking on, or that company taking on a lot of the liability and our ability to tax, I think fits East Hampton way better than a Hampton Inn. So, with that, I gotta go.
All right.
Can I
I'm
ask
sorry.
a question before you go?
No.
Okay.
So,
I always thought EDIC,
Chair.
the E stood for economic.
It doesn't.
Anymore?
wait, say that again?
It's
E and
it's now
EDIC
being
stands
listed
for
as East Hampton.
It does on the letterhead, Economic
I know,
Development
but
and
it's
Industrial
Economic
Commission.
Development and
Yeah,
Industrial Commission.
that's correct.
Okay, the website says East Hampton.
Okay, I see that.
No, okay, I know that, it does. What are you looking at?
Okay, you,
Middle.
thank you.
Economic Development and Industrial.
Yes, sir.
East Hampton, so
So-
it's EEDIC.
Yeah.
It is the East Hampton Development Industrial Commission in all of the city language describing what we are. So it does say that there, but I have changed all our name on the agenda the whole time I've been president,
Did it-
chair, whatever I am of this.
Did it
It's
officially
East
change
Hampton.
somewhere though? Because to Josh's
I think it
point,
was a mistake.
It's, yeah, I think it's listed in all of the documents that I see incorporating us as a committee as East Hampton Development Industrial Commission.
yeah, that's not what it started out as.
No, and all my minutes
So
say
it may have
economic.
changed in the past, and I haven't looked far back enough to know when that
Just
was.
evolved somehow.
Yeah.
So, just to keep it moving, you're gonna invite Jana.
I am?
I'll speak with Peter Davies I'm gonna see him on Friday. So
Okay.
I'll push him.
Sorry, Chris, who's Jana?
She's the chair of the Affordable and Fair Housing Partnership.
I'll talk with her or Jackie, and we'll see if either of them can give us
Yeah.
their co-chairs.
Okay. And I think Chris answered like all the questions that I had really. You said that you go with one service on the electric in what you're doing now, or are you adding
I
a
think we're
second
going to
service?
be adding a separate
Okay,
service
cool.
usually because I think a lot of the houses are going to be 60 amp or even 100, and ideally it's two separate. And upgrading is just the same price as adding a new one.
Okay.
Easier.
Well, I assume tenants would, landlords, if you will, would want tenants.
Yeah, they want them separately. It's like a sub meter or just a new service.
And to speak to Jeff's point about the incrementalism, I think that the first thing that I'd like to see done is just getting the by right part for things that don't violate any existing zoning, obviously.
Agreed.
You know, because it seems to me that when no zoning is being violated and you have to go before the board for the special permit, that's just to give neighbors a chance to gripe. Really, is that really the only point? Okay. To
Yeah.
get, just not gripe, but to have a say in the process.
Yeah, the conversation is that the zoning board applies the same criteria to the projects, and if you can put the criteria into the ordinance, so it's not that it's just go do whatever you want. So a lot of times it's either, so if you know, there's a way it's called performance criteria that you would put in the zoning so that they are met, and then you are building with a building permit. So it's things like making sure that if your parking is close to a property line, that, you know, I think the idea would be that you might require a fence or shrubs to
Okay.
screen the property adjacent to it. So that's in every special permit I sat through when I was in Amherst, sat through a lot of these. That was like the main thing. Where's the parking? Are the headlights gonna flash over there?
Is this stuff that's already in the existing zoning law though? Or is that something that you guys were saying be better if you did this.
Right, you'd be better if you did this
Okay.
and attach it to that section. So you would create a section for a second dwelling unit, and here are the things that you'd have to meet.
Okay.
So screening from adjacent properties from headlights, and then sometimes like the exterior light. So if you have a building which is facing the side, like you have an exit door and a light. So that can be low wattage or downcast, so it's not a floodlight.
So,
So like once you meet these performance things,
but these performance things are largely arbitrary? They weren't zoning requirements, right?
yeah, so I guess I can see what you're saying. So,
Well, so
we
what I'm
want to, we
basing-
want to make them zoning requirements so that the proposer, the proponent could meet them and make sure that they're clear what should be met. This is part of what when we send out the request for proposal to the consultant, so this is something that we would get, we've asked for a zoning ordinance that would set this up to allow these by right. So we would be having conversations with this group in the partnership about what kind of criteria would make sense to have in there
But if
for
you're
a
talking,
project to be met.
I was losing you. You were talking about safety things, exit lights and things like that.
Well, yeah.
That's not required on a two-family today.
That's what I'm asking. How did you feel about that process? Did you feel that you guys were holding things up when you were at Amherst?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
yes, because
Okay.
I think it's not to suggest or dictate the safety lighting, but the fixture type to make sure that it's the common thing. So you go to a public hearing and your neighbor's putting up a building, and like, well, I'm worried about lights glaring in my, my window or my yard.
Right.
So like that can be
Exterior lights.
exterior lights can be regulated
Right.
so that it's just met. So
Right, but meanwhile, today I could just throw a light on my garage, a 500-watt bulb that shines into my neighbor's yard. See, that's what I'm trying to avoid. I just want to be able for people to get a permit from a contractor, not even go to the building inspector, just have the contractor do it. And as long as we're building something that's within existing zoning rules, then everything's cool.
Well, they'd go to the inspector because they would need a building permit at a minimum.
No, I don't mean the homeowner. I mean, a contractor goes to the
Oh, contractor,
inspector,
yep,
and
yep.
just
The
you
homeowner
hire a
doesn't
contractor, say, build me an accessory dwelling, follow the zoning, obviously.
Right.
right.
And you're done.
Yep.
I think
Right.
that's really what I'm looking at.
Yeah,
And-
my thought is that the zoning is not as good as it should be. So like we
And
would
that's-
want to create some criteria for this new type
Absolutely.
of use so that we could have that buttoned up, and then the
It's-
contractor could walk in and say, I'm needing this, this, and this.
Right, it's a perfect time to address those things.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
So, then the action item is?
Yeah. Okay, so you're gonna do Jenna, or Jackie, I'm gonna find some sample laws and I'll speak to Peter
Okay,
about where he can point me towards that. I'll also get in touch with PVPC.
okay, so what we'll talk about at the next meeting is what?
I'll bring sample language
Okay, great,
and we'll see what Jenna has to say.
okay. Outstanding,
Maybe they've done half this work.
maybe, we'll find out.
Yeah.
All right, we are not gonna develop a plan in the next 2.5 minutes. Two things. One is, how open are we to either every other month or every 3 months having a 90-minute meeting? Because it is hard to get stuff done in 60 minutes once a
Agreed.
month.
Yeah.
Are we open to that idea in general?
Yes.
Yeah.
I have a 6 o'clock on Tuesdays, so we usually get there about 5. But if I was there at 5:30, it wouldn't be a problem. Once, when you said every other meeting?
Every other or
I
every
think every other
third?
month.
Okay,
Every other month. Yeah,
that'd be cool.
I'm good with that.
Okay, great. Let's say that November is going to be our first endeavor of a 90-minute meeting. Hooray! Every other, so successful. And we're going to close out with, where'd Casey go?
He left.
Is there?
Okay. Cassie did some excellent homework. And based on, yeah, good student, check plus. So at the end of last month's meeting, we started talking about the idea of vacant storefronts and what are ways that we can incentivize business owners or property owners to be filling those vacant storefronts. Cassie did some sleuthing and it's top notch. So we have links to these things. We're going to send them to you, and a portion of November's meeting will be devoted to some of what we learn about this. I'll send you a couple of prompts to think about.
Let me just say what they are, though,
Please
just
do.
to pique interest.
Great.
ordinance in Arlington, Massachusetts, the only one in this state, about how they deal with empty storefronts. The rumor of Northampton having rules was false. And so, but they did commission a study of best practices for how to deal with empty storefronts. That is wicked interesting, it really is. So,
Is there anything like that for houses? Houses that are empty and looking like heck?
What a beautiful question. Sounds like you gave yourself some homework. I'll write that down. Josh wants to know.
Okay, yes. I'm mostly concerned about the businesses, but yeah, I'll find out about houses too.
Cool. All right, we're not going to get into the communication thing. We're going to end at 5.
Just as one other, I don't know if Jeff, you were including in an email, but I had asked Dave Boyle to forward everyone that article from Hadley on the 55 housing. The developer from Amherst, which is in the process of building one, and it sounds like he's going to build a second one closer to the central downtown area. And the only reason I wanted everybody to see it is apparently he was looking for a zone change to get the second one in because it's going to overlap a zone that doesn't allow it. And I just thought that was interesting that here's Hadley, all of 6,500 residents who are going to have 2 over 55 housing units.
you mean for people aged 55 and over?
Correct.
How cool is that?
Yeah. I mean, they're out there, they're all around us, but they're not here except for Lathrop in Easthampton. But the issue is zoning here too sometimes, and getting them. It's back to the example of putting a nice house as opposed to a mobile home. You can't necessarily put them where you prefer to have them go based on zoning. You had talked once before, no, you're not Chris.
Chris is in here.
You had talked once before about an overlay, and I'm not exactly sure how that works. That allows something to go in even though it's not zoned for that? If you created an overlay?
Yeah, the overlay district concept is that you need a purpose. So if it's over 55, you have your purpose, and then you need an area to put the overlay on, and it gives you an added layer of flexibility to put something new there or regulate something a little bit differently.
Does it override the existing?
Usually it's a trick. It's a trick of words, whether it overrides or complements, but you have the baseline zoning, so like if it's commercial, the baseline zoning stays commercial, so you could always still do that, but you could also do something new. So like you could add affordable or 55 plus. I remember looking a while back. I think the homework, if you're signing homework, and it would be nice if it wasn't me, to find out.
Doing the homework or signing it?
Both. But Hadley zoning, I checked a while back, and Hadley, I believe, has their zoning online, so it would be pulling their over 55 ordinance and just pulling that language out and figure out what it says.
Would you like to start there, Josh?
I'll take that. I'll take
Tom
that.
will.
It should be pretty straightforward, but just to identify. So a lot of times, like even with the overlay, then you might need a certain amount of parcel size to be eligible for the.
And again, the reason it piqued my interest, Jeff, is that maybe he was building this within the constraints of, or requirements, I should say, of the over 55 zoning.
Yeah.
But based on what he wanted to do to bring it closer to the downtown, he was going to overlap into an area that wasn't zoned for
Yeah.
it. And so he was going to town meeting for that zone change for that piece that he needed to expand it.
Yep. That's the way I read it. That they would be. It'd be a map change, really,
Right.
for Hadley, because they already have that.
And again, what sparked it for me, you seem to trip over this all over Easthampton. I just happened to be talking to Easthampton resident, 89 years old, living in her own home that she and her husband built. She's a widow, and it's now come to the point where her family has said, okay, it's not great for you to be in this home anymore. And I said to her, oh, what are you doing? She said, I'm going to Lathrop. I said, oh, great, good for you. Going to sell the home, move to Lathrop. As soon as there's an opening, is what caught my ear. And so how long does she stay at that home before the family says, hey, Mom, we got to look at Westfield or Southwick or Agawam because we really need to move you, and Lathrop, we don't know when Lathrop's going to have an opening.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I hope that the committee knows that, you know, we've talked about this as a group for a while, and I always took it seriously, and, you know, found the funding to do the study that I think is going to unlock the couple of the key questions that we've asked over and over. So I think, I was originally set to put the RFP out this week. I think I'm gonna be off, I'm gonna bump myself out a week, but we're,
Pull it out this week.
the request for proposals, so
Okay.
we've got, you know, sorry, the project has evolved, so we were looking at a housing needs and zoning assessment, which was really, the way we initially started talking about it was market rate housing, because we really lack actual true data on that. But when the mayor was doing an update to city council, the chair of the CPA committee said, why don't we roll in the affordable housing plan update and do them together? CPA can contribute some funds. So what we're looking at now is a comprehensive housing study
Nice.
that will show market rate trends and needs, and it'll also update our housing production plan, which is our affordable housing needs. And it's gonna give us this total glimpse of our housing market and our housing needs. And then we're gonna look at the accessory dwelling units, and we're gonna look at barriers to development of multifamily. So I think that, to me, is gonna be where they should pretty quickly identify that there is no specific zoning in place to encourage over 55, which we once had, and it got removed.
Right.
And it seems like now is the time to consider putting it back in place.
So in the next 30 seconds, if I had more money that I know what to do with, and I purchased the Courtney property in Northampton Street, and I wanted to put over 55 housing in there, backdrop against the mountain, beautiful, you know, does our zoning allow that there? Or does it take all kinds of years of special permits and meetings and what have you?
But your parking would be the impediment.
Well, there's plenty of acreage there.
I mean, to develop a large parcel for multifamily would take some time, and it's a huge commitment. So there's definitely like a process.
So
But
it
I
sounds like
think-
we could really use the over 55 zoning then.
Yeah, I mean, you could do multifamily there, but it would be volunteering, so the developer would be volunteering that it is set for this age group.
Right.
So it would be merely a voluntary process that maybe would be followed up with conditions.
So how did we do Lathrop when it went in? That's been there for years.
It was all just
They
the regular,
sold like all of that before they even broke ground.
and at that time it was just 8.3, which is like multifamily, it's just regular. I mean, if you look at the use and not the users, then you could do apartments, you know, and that's essentially what you're talking about. But then classifying it for a certain age, if we really drill down into this, there has to be a broader community discussion about some suitable properties that, you know, people could wrap their heads around, and then this could be a good area for like an over 55 development and get consensus, and then you would make it by right. You make it by site plan review, you take out the special permit.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you could do it by special permit, but there's just a lot of risk in a special permit, so.
Okay. So 10 minutes into the,
Yeah, I'm so
90
sorry
minutes we're gonna
to
use
keep
next
asking
time.
questions, but
go for it.
do you have any dates or projected dates for the housing study results or deadline for the RFP? Something like that?
Yeah, we set a deadline for, so the housing partner, I apologize because the housing partnership, Jana's group has seen the draft RFP, and I had not gotten it to this group. I will get it to you with the knowledge that it's gonna go out, and it's this baseline kind of document to go. We want the project to be done by August.
The results in, you mean? Okay. well,
So there's a quick
That's
turnaround
quick.
time on choosing the provider.
The provider would be chosen by, I think so we're off a week, so it'd be right before Thanksgiving. We would be opening proposals from consultants, and then we would be awarding December, January, and then February, March, 1, 2. They'd have 6 months. This is rather ambitious, so the ending could slip a little bit, but
Yeah.
thinking of it
But I was
by the end
thinking-
of next summer.
Yeah, that's, next year is good.
Right.
How much is the grant for?
So we got a grant of 35,000, and then the proposal, so I'm bringing this to CPA to have them fund 15,000. So
Okay.
it's a total project of 50,000, and so that's market assessment, and housing production plan.
Okay.
The housing production plan is required copy, and it's set to expire in August.
We're moving the needle.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you for pushing that.
I mean, this group really, I had committed to kind of looking at it, and then the funding source popped up, so
Yep.
I couldn't have planned that better.
All right,
Says the
till
plan.
November.
See
Do
you
your
in
homework. I will send you reminders about the homework.
Motion to adjourn.
Yeah, well, I will get there. I'm telling you, it's gonna happen. The next meeting is November 19th from 4 to 5:30. Tell your partners that you will not be there till after. So, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Any seconds?
That's okay.
Oh my gosh, all in favor, holler aye.
Aye.
Yo, outstanding. Have a wonderful month.
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, thank you.